This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm back. Thank you all for the anniversary wishes. We had a great time up at Lake Raven. The phone number, you want to be on the Eric Erickson Show today, 877-973-7425. As always, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the live stream, the show notes, the podcast, all that great stuff. Friends, I want to start today with kind of the lay of the land, because we are 21 days, just over 20 days from a presidential election. And if you're Kamala Harris, you're going on Brett Baer's show. Now there's a rumor she's trying to get on Joe Rogan's show. Your internal polling has got to show you have real problems, and you don't have a lot of time to fix them. I know you're not prone to doing this, but as I said on Friday, when you plan a campaign, you plan the campaign from Election Day backwards. We now have 3-4 more days this week. All of next week and the week after. By the Saturday before the election, ironically, the Day of the Dead, that is a campaign going on cruise control. But wait, there's more. You have about a week now until the 22nd to finalize anything that's really going to shake up the campaign. Now, in a tied race, and it is technically a tied race, you've got a little more wiggle room. But all of your major advertising needs to be out the door by next Tuesday. Your mail pieces need to be prepared and out the door, because God knows when the post office is going to deliver them. Your campaign then needs to set about turning out the vote, maximizing your voter turnout. Democrats still are missing Donald Trump going to California and New York. It had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with saving House seats. He'd like to not to be impeached on day one. But all of the data right now points to momentum being in Donald Trump's favor. Again, before I begin here, this is very important. This is a tied race, technically. It is a tied race. But in being a tied race, the trajectory now points towards a Donald Trump victory and not a Kamala Harris victory. And the reason I can safely say it points to that is because the polling shows a decline in Harris's support. And what that decline comes from are Republican voters who do not like Donald Trump coming home to Donald Trump. Let me just give you the landscape right now. 21 days before the election, 60% of Americans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. For the first time in 3 decades, more voters identify themselves as Republican than Democrat. Most Americans now believe that they got more benefits from the Trump administration than they are presently getting from the Biden-Harris administration. Donald Trump right now leads Kamala Harris on the economy and inflation, which pollsters treat as separate issues, immigration and crime. The top 4 issues for voters right now: economy, immigration, inflation, and crime. Donald Trump, in other words, is beating Kamala Harris on all four of those issues, and those are the four biggest issues voters care about. According to Gallup, 50% of voters believe the Republican Party will make them more prosperous compared to 44% for Democrats. 54% of voters believe the Republicans will keep the country safe from foreign threats compared to only 40% for Democrats. 55% of voters believe the government should do less. 55% of Americans favor less immigration, and a majority favor mass deportation of illegal aliens. More Americans favor Donald Trump to handle Israel and Ukraine appropriately. More Americans have a favorable impression of Donald Trump than Kamala Harris. Y'all, that's the data. That's not me. That's not my opinion. That's the data. That's the data from the Pew poll, from the Gallup poll, from the Ipsos poll, from the NBC poll, from the New York Times poll, the Washington Post poll. You name it. That is the combined data of all the polling out there. That is the polling blueprint for the next 3 weeks. Donald Trump wins on every issue voters care about. Donald Trump has higher favorability than Kamala Harris. Donald Trump's presidential administration favorability now has majority support of the public compared to the Biden-Harris administration. All of those signs point to a race that's not as close as the public polling shows. And not only that, but when you look at the candidates and what they're doing, the internal polling dynamics for Kamala Harris and her campaign right now must not be good. They have gone into full Looney Tunes mode on the Democratic side. You got Barack Obama on the campaign trail lecturing black men that they better get out and support Kamala Harris, which is wild to me that Barack Obama is going out and lecturing black men. And you know, the spin from Democrats, oh, they like to be lectured. I bet they don't. Nothing on the ground is adding up for Kamala Harris right now. If you're Kamala Harris and you're going on Fox News, a network that you don't think is your friend, what are you going for? I'll tell you what you're going for. The narrowing of the polls, the NBC News poll in particular, shows that Kamala Harris is beginning to lose ground with Republican voters who at one point thought they could vote for her. Here, listen to this from MSNBC.
You're exactly right. The timing of our poll is really instructive here. And when our September poll came out and had Harris with a 5-point lead over Donald Trump, that, of course, was after the debate. It was after a really rough news environment for Donald Trump with the discussion about Springfield, Ohio. And now all of a sudden we do show a tied race. And what has occurred is that those soft Republicans, non-MAGA Republicans, have come back home to Trump. In our September poll, they were lagging, obviously, after the debate, after the discussion of Springfield, Ohio. Our poll finds them that they are back with Trump, and that explains him going from 44% in our poll in September now to 48%. But, Joe, you ended up mentioning the things that Harris has to work on with shoring up Latino voters, getting African Americans in the fold, white women. Our poll ends up having a really big gender gap where Harris has a 14-point lead among female voters, while Donald Trump has a 16-point lead among male voters. That's overall a 30-point net gender gap. And what is kind of fascinating is that Trump's lead with men is slightly larger than Harris's lead with women. And if her ability to get back in a lead, national lead over Trump is being able to have a bigger lead among women than Trump's lead among men. And so a lot of those demographics, this is the last 3 weeks of the race. This is why you end up having mobilization and campaign to be able to juice your turnout, to shore up your weaknesses. And we're going to see what both campaigns have up their sleeves over the next 3 weeks.
You know, again, if she's losing men by a wider margin than she's losing women, women tend to turn out more than men. But in a presidential race, there can be parity. And Kamala Harris is not doing well among married women. This oftentimes gets missed by the press corps. Donald Trump and Mitt Romney both won married women, not women overall. A lot of single women out there who vote, but among married women, They did well, and Donald Trump is doing well with married women again this time against Kamala Harris. And then you've got, of course, Donald Trump and black voters. Here's Harry Inton over at CNN.
I mean, the bottom line is this. At this particular hour, if you believe the polling, Donald Trump's going to put up the best performance with black voters since Richard Nixon back in 1960. Not 68, since 1960. That's 64 years ago. Among Hispanic voters, Donald Trump's going to put up the best performance for Republicans since 2004 and George W. Bush.
Now, this is notable because listen to the conversation among Democrats. John Heilemann on MSNBC this morning.
Is that the Harris campaign finally allowed David Plouffe to go out and try to talk about the data on both Dan Pfeiffer's podcast on Pod Save America and in New York Magazine yesterday. And I will tell you that David Plouffe is he's a partisan and he fights for his team. But he is not a BSer. And if you read his assessment of the data, it is, I think, as clear, as both sophisticated and clear-eyed as anything anybody could say. And the two campaigns do not disagree about this. And what Plouffe basically says is, if you see a poll that has Harris up by 4 points, throw it in the trash. If you see a poll that has Trump up by 4 points, throw it in the trash. It's a tie race. This is uncomfortable for Democrats. It's a tie race. It's going to be a tie race all the way through to Election Day. It's going to be maybe the closest election of our lifetimes. Everyone is going to be scared if they care about the future of the country.
Again, I don't know that yeah, the data shows it's a tied race, and I tend to trust the data and the polling average. I don't trust the individual polls, and I know you guys don't trust the polls. But the polling averages historically are pretty good, and they show a tied race. But when you look at the tied race and you look at how Donald Trump in all the tied race data still performs overwhelmingly well, I get that there's a dislike of Donald Trump, and any other Republican would probably be blowing it out of the water right now. But at the same time, I do wonder if the dislike of Trump is keeping some people from saying they're actually voting for Trump, even though they actually are, like in 2016. Where Donald Trump overperformed his polling. And in 2020, Donald Trump overperformed his polling. And in a tied race, I think that benefits Donald Trump. The fact that the Democrats are in this level of panic right now, you have Barack Obama lecturing black men. You have Kamala Harris going to Fox News and possibly Joe Rogan. You have Kamala Harris now sitting for more interviews. They've taken the bubble wrap off of her. While Donald Trump is going to California and New York, he's had multiple visits in Pennsylvania. The Democrats are maligning his rally in Pennsylvania, claiming he wandered around the stage for 45 minutes listening to music, pay no attention to the medical emergencies happening in the crowd. You've got CBS News and the other networks in full meltdown mode, going all neo-Nazi, racist, misogynist. Donald Trump is going to get you killed. Where's the joy? Where is the joy? This is not a joyful campaign. I'll tell you where the joy is. Joy Reid on MSNBC having a not quite normal vision of the future.
With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters and leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk. Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men, too. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power.
You got that? Yeah, because women are economically independent now. The men are turning fascist, and it's black men, too. That's why this is a tied race. That's not the joyful vibe of a winning campaign team. And I will tell you, privately, Democrats are bemoaning the fact that Kamala Harris is not gaining upward momentum. She's declining among key demographic groups she needs. This is why you're beginning to see a Democratic meltdown out there, and why her partisans are out there rushing to say, no, guys, it's really a tied race. It's really a tied race. It shouldn't be a tied race for Kamala Harris, because Donald Trump is disliked by a majority of Americans who say they're going to show up and vote, and yet they're still willing to vote for him. This has all the feelings of the end of the John Kerry campaign in 2004, where some of his aides were still super upbeat, but the reality was everyone in the press and the Democratic Party began to recognize he was not going to cross the finish line, and the panic and backbiting was starting 3 weeks before the election. We are 3 weeks before this election, and the panic and backbiting is starting in the Harris campaign. You do not hear people within the Trump campaign maligning each other, attacking each other, and blaming each other. That's coming from the Harris campaign, and that's what losing campaigns do. 3 weeks before the election, her team are acting like losers. In fact, her team is acting like Donald Trump is winning, and Donald Trump's team is acting like they're winning, and all of that is shifting the vibe. Harris claims she was surfing to victory. Kamala Harris is accused very credibly by Christopher Rufo of plagiarism. I would say it's not even an accusation at this point. The New York Times' own expert that they relied on said, yes, it's plagiarism in Kamala Harris's book that she wrote. She copied Wikipedia. Now, here's what you should know. Rand Paul several years ago gave a speech, and the New York Times made a very big deal of the fact that one of the things that Rand Paul said in his speech was lifted from Wikipedia without attribution. Now, what the New York Times is saying with this expert is, well, it wasn't that bad, and it wasn't really fraud or maliciousness. Problem is that expert has now come forward and said, wait a second, guys, I haven't actually read the book or seen it. A New York Times reporter just called me and asked for my take on it, and I didn't know they were going to make me such a big part of the story. The reality is that Kamala Harris has been caught plagiarizing, which is something that destroyed Joe Biden's original presidential campaign back in the day. And now the New York Times is covering for it and saying it's a conservative's pounce story, not a legitimate story, that the sitting vice president of the United States of America plagiarized whole sections of Wikipedia. There are two reasons they are being this dismissive of it. Number one, they're on her team. Number two, if they pursue the story, it highlights how much they're on the team and the fact that the New York Times dropped the ball on doing due diligence of a vice president of the United States. Anyone else would have been vetted. You know who was? J.D. Vance. The New York Times interviewed the people that his book was based on and came away with him telling the truth, and yet still called into question his account. So J.D. Vance accurately writes a book without plagiarizing. The New York Times questions it. Kamala Harris writes a book where she actually plagiarizes, and the New York Times is like, it's no big deal because they're on her team. They have abandoned all pretense of trying to be fair. Americans for Prosperity wants to fairly build this country around common sense conservative solutions, and they'd love to have you on board with them. If you go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer, you can sign up with Americans for Prosperity today. And if you do, you will be hands-on on the fight and boots on the ground in the fight to advance freedom in this country, to apply common sense conservative solutions to the things that ail the nation. They'd love to have you. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP. They give you all the facts and figures you need to persuade your friends that common sense conservative solutions are the right way to go. They teach you how to go to your local government or your state government to advocate for free markets and free people and families and school choice and common sense conservative solutions. They'd love to have you engage with them. Again, it's americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. They are the largest and leading grassroots organization in the country. They would love to have you engaged with them. If you want to find out more, go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be on the program, 877-973-7425. I really would like to encourage you to text the word Army to 33777 and sign up. If you are in Oklahoma, we are going to be in Tulsa the 2 days after the Thursday after the election. And we're going to be doing a live event. I want to be able to get you information as to where we're going to be so you can RSVP. And easiest way is for you to text the word Army to 33777. We'll be doing these around the country. We'll also be able to give you action items. If you call Congress, call your state legislature over legislation as we flip the switches on this activism center and turn it on. Love to have you, though, but you got to text ARMY, ARMY, to the number 33777. Click that link. Just need your name, zip code, and email address, and we'll be able to engage with you. I got to go to the J.D. Vance, Martha Raddatz interview because it was galling. Martha Raddatz is at the top of her game at ABC News and just showed how out of touch she is with your average American. I don't even want to tell you what it is. And you may have seen the clip. I'm going to play the clip and then talk about it. This is J.D. Vance and Martha Raddatz on This Week on ABC News.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay, let's just end that with they did not invade or take over the city, as Donald Trump said. I want to move on to
just a few
women.
Apartment complexes, no big deal.
Yes. Yes. Is the outrage that Donald Trump said they invaded and took over Aurora, Colorado, or is the outrage that they're here? They're here. The nitpicking of Trump on, okay, so they didn't take over the city. Why are they here? Why is this gang here? Y'all have heard of MS-13, the violent gang that's in this country. Law enforcement around this country says that this gang is far worse. This Venezuelan gang is far worse. Its overlords operate out of prisons in Venezuela, and many of those people who are in this country were in prisons in Venezuela. The regime there let them out, and they migrated here, and they're setting up shop in cities across America. A buddy of mine who works with the DEA, they've been on high alert about this gang. They are extremely violent. Not only is this gang extremely violent, this gang does what a lot of other gangs do not do. This gang targets local public officials and their families. You're the local mayor. If you don't turn a blind eye, we know where your kid goes to school, and we're not afraid to kill them. That's what this gang does. That's how they operate. Donald Trump makes a big deal about this gang being in Aurora, Colorado. By the way, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio. They're cropped up now in parts of Gwinnett County here in Georgia. And Martha Raddatz is upset that Donald Trump said they had taken over the town instead of just some apartment complexes. This is a damning indictment on Martha Raddatz and the American press. She lives in a comfy home in Northern Virginia. Who cares about these people in the apartment complexes? Donald Trump said something that wasn't quite true. She doesn't want to ask and exercise the intellectual curiosity of why are they there? How did they get there? Who is responsible for them being there? She just wants to dwell on the fact that Donald Trump said they'd taken over a city, and the mayor says that's not true. The governor says that's not true. Martha Raddatz gets a car service to take her to the studio, I bet. People in her position, they get car services. You've got to take public transportation, probably, where you are harassed with the homeless people and the schizophrenics. Remember in New York, Daniel Pennyman, the man dies. Daniel Pennyman is protecting the passengers on the train. And the New York Times and elsewhere, their position was, well, you expect that, Andre. You expect to be harassed by schizophrenics on subway trains. Never mind that some of those people at the New York Times, they get car services too. They don't have to be down there with you people. It's all about your station in life. Martha Raddatz gets security. You're not even allowed to have a gun. You're vilified for having one. Martha Raddatz gets a car service. You got to take the subway with the crackheads. Your apartment complex is overrun by a violent Venezuelan gang. Well, it doesn't affect Martha Raddatz in Northern Virginia, so who cares about you? This is a pattern with the American press corps. How dare you exaggerate that a Venezuelan gang that should not be here has set up shop around the country, not just in Aurora, Colorado. But let's meditate on that for a moment. Why are they here? They're here to expand their criminal enterprise. How did they get here? They crossed illegally into the United States of America. And now, if Donald Trump says he wants to round them all up and deport them, well, that's Nazism. There's no win for you here. There's no win for Americans here. The Democrats tell us that they're here now and we can't get rid of them. It would be bad for our economy if you got rid of the violent gang members of this gang from Venezuela. It would be bad for us if we rounded up these people. I got to say something about J.D. Vance. I very much like J.D. Vance, even as I do think that a lot of his economic ideas are bad ideas, that they're warmed over Democratic populism, big labor, economics. At the same time, he made a point with a New York Times reporter the other day that, a lot of businesses in this country, they're taking the easy way out. They're hiring the immigrant population that's come into this country, and they're saying, well, birth rate in this country is in decline, so we got to hire these immigrants. What about the people who've just dropped out and given up altogether? It is certainly more costly to bring an American in to do the job. You can pay the immigrant, oftentimes under the table, a lower wage. And a lot of these young American men are struggling with drug addiction and other issues. But also, aren't we all Americans? Shouldn't the company for the health and survival, not just of itself, but its community and its customers, be willing to invest some in training these young men, helping them overcome their addiction, giving them meaning in life? Because many of these young American men who've dropped out of the workforce, they just have no meaning. They have no value. They don't see the value in their life. You want a prosperous future society, you can't just keep importing immigrants to do the jobs, because at some point you're going to run out of customers. You need to build up the customer base as well. It just seems like we all need to make an investment, including American businesses, to make an investment in Americans. And this easy shortcut, what the Democrats are leaving out, what Martha Raddatz is leaving out, is this entitled elite sense of just giving up on Americans. They got fentanyl addictions. They don't read and write well. They're too dumb for a job we can get a Haitian to do. We can get the Haitian to do it for cheaper. There's this sense of corporate America, the media elite, the Democrats, they're just giving up on Americans. And I think that's one reason that Donald Trump is doing better than, frankly, he should be doing. If you're a Trump supporter, you don't like it when it's phrased that way, but it's true. He's doing way better than a guy like Donald Trump should be doing. But the reason is because most Americans, I think, do realize that Donald Trump hasn't given up on them. That's why the media goes through all sorts of extraordinary effort to try to convince you that Donald Trump really doesn't care about you. He's really in it for himself. He's taking advantage of you. And meanwhile, the media and the Democrats who say that they've completely given up on you. You want the Haitian? Fine. You don't want to pay for the drug recovery and give meaning in life to the white American kid in Ohio? That's fine. We'll bring in the Haitians. Got Martha Raddatz on ABC News saying, well, they haven't taken over the city. It's just some apartment complexes. Screw those people. I mean, it's Section 8 housing anyway. These are the Americans that we've given up on. So who cares about them? That's the attitude. That's not what she says, but it's the attitude she conveys of these are just poor Americans in Section 8 housing. They get what they deserve. The gangs have taken over there. Who cares where the gangs came from? We can't blame the Biden-Harris administration for this. We got to stop Trump. And it is why so many Americans are tuning out the press. It is why so many Americans are ditching Democrats right now. They've given up on the American dream for Americans and instead prefer to offer it to illegal immigrants, many of whom are gangbangers coming into this country, taking over apartment complexes. And because it doesn't affect the media, it's nowhere near where they live, the media is fine with it. They don't want to blame the Biden-Harris administration's policy failures, which is what led to it. No, instead, they'll blame Donald Trump for exaggerating. It's a detachment from the reality of the lived experience of most Americans. It is an arrogance from these members of the press. It's only a few apartment complexes, after all. But in those apartment complexes are American citizens who are there because oftentimes they have failed at life. They've made very poor decisions, but oftentimes they've been trying to get back on their feet and they have to rely on government help to do it. And now they live in a crime-infested neighborhood where they're not safe to leave their apartment complex and they can't get back on their feet. There are Americans who have failed at life who've made terrible decisions and blame other people. They become conspiracy theorists. They don't want to get a good job. They can't get a good job. They got no desire to get a good job. They have no work ethic. But then there are a lot of Americans who would love to get a good job, but they need help. And the government's spending all of its money helping the illegals come into this country instead of helping the local Americans. And the big business decides I would rather invest in the illegal alien than invest in the American and get the American back on his feet. Who's for those people? Trump. That's how they've rationalized it, Trump. And the press corps and the Democrats don't seem to understand that. There are so many people who are voting for Donald Trump because he seems to be for them, while the American press corps and the Democrats say, it's just your apartment complex that has a gang, not mine. No big deal. It is a very big deal to those Americans. And those Americans, well, they're becoming members of Trump's coalition. And can you blame them? No, you can't. Now, I can't blame you if you go to Vision Computers and get yourself a great computer because your one size fits all at the big box store. It's just not cutting it for you. And with Vision Computers, not only do they build you a bleeding edge computer that's going to save you money and time, they're also going to give you their award-winning 5-star tech support. Vision Computers builds your computer, saves you money, and then in the process, you get their tech support for free. Now, what about you? You've already got you've got your laptop from that online store. You took the time, you did the research, you bought your computer, but it's not quite firing on all cylinders for you. And you need help, and you can't afford an IT department because you're a sole proprietor. You're sitting in the Starbucks every day doing your work, and you don't have an IT department. Well, Vision can do that for you for $179 a year. You can call Vision Computers and start a relationship with them. They give you a special number in 15 seconds or less. You call the number, you get your answers on what to do with your computer, what's not working right with your computer. They fix your computer. They can remote in. They can do email support. They can do printer support, $179 a year. By the way, it's not just for you, sole proprietor sitting in Starbucks, but you, small businessmen. You've got like a team of 10, 15 people, and you're trying to do the numbers, and you can't afford the outside IT guy to come in and manage everything. Vision can do it for you. $179 per computer a year, not a month, not a week, not a day, a year. Reach out to them, 404-COMPUTE, 404-COMPUTE. Call Vision Computers, tell them I sent you. You're going to save even more money. Any one of you nationwide, Sacramento to Miami, call Vision Computers at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com. Let them be your IT department. They'll save you money and keep you online. This other program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, you're buying a building, you need a franchise, you're trying to get heavy equipment. First Liberty knows how to work with businesses to get them the funding they need. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com. You got great credit. They can move real quick. They make their own decisions, firstlibertyga.com. I want to go to the phones now. Terry, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm out for a walk listening to you, and it's great.
Fantastic.
I just wanted to say, I think Martha is wrong. Trump was right. The Venezuelan gangs have taken over that entire city. They've taken over the collective soul of that city, the comfort of the people that live there, the fear of being in a city where you can't go to the store without possibly running into these people. Just because they live in an apartment doesn't mean they're not going to come to your house or not like you at the gas station because you blocked them in.
Terry.
So
Now, Terry, it's not an apartment complex. It's a handful of apartment complexes.
Well, okay, let me rephrase. A handful of Venezuelan gang members have taken over the collective soul of a city.
Yeah, look,
So
the fact of the matter is, look, you're right, and in Aurora, Colorado, it's a great city. My buddy Ken Buck lives out there. I've been out there a number of times. Beautiful place, but yes, it is the talk of the town out there. Whether the mayor, who is a Republican, wants to acknowledge it or not, it is something that they are buzzing about. That how did these people get there? They got there because they crossed illegally into the country. The Biden administration has done nothing to round them up and deport them. They have moved into these. Apartment complexes. Yeah, this is a massive problem, and the fact that the East Coast media in New York and D.C. that gets a car service and security is like, it's no big deal. It's not really the whole city. Well, the whole city's concerned about it. They're in Gwinnett County, Georgia now. They're more violent than MS-13. They do drugs and money laundering and all sorts of other things. They will target the children of politicians in local communities. So the politicians and the police do nothing. They threaten police officers and their families. They will stop at nothing to expand. They are a violent gang that is only here because of the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration. And that the news media is more upset that Donald Trump said an exaggeration or was not nice in how he phrased it, as opposed to why the hell are these people here? Because of the failures of the Biden-Harris administration. A few bad apples will begin to rot everything. And in Aurora, Colorado, there are really good people there, and they are getting very nervous as this gang sets up shop. Now, speaking of nervousness, the Democrats are getting very nervous indeed. And they sent out Bill Clinton and Barack Obama onto the campaign trail, and both men promptly undermined Kamala Harris's message and helped Donald Trump. I've got the audio when we come back.